Hello, my name is Costantino Oliva. I'm from the Institute of Digital Games at the University of Malta, and today I'll be presenting a paper related to my game Otogarden, exploring musical improvisation in digital games. So to start with, I'd like to show you a trailer for the game. So, as you might have noticed, Otogarden is a single-player game. It's available for free at otogarden.com. It plays in a browser, but it also plays on an app for macOS and Windows computers alike. The game was designed by me, and I also did the sound design for the game, together with Marvin Zammit on programming and Fabrizio Cali art and animation. The game was funded by the University of Malta. So, my reasoning for developing and publishing Otogarden was that I really wanted to explore musical improvisation in the context of digital games. Specifically, I wanted to stimulate an improvisatory perspective during engagement with digital games. So I consider musical improvisation to be an underexplored musical modality within digital games, both theory, design, and analysis. And I was very influenced by the work of guitarist Derek Bailey, who wrote that musical improvisation can be an activity of enormous complexity and sophistication, or the simplest and most direct expression. The research methodology that I employed to do that is connected with the methodology of research through design, which has been used for over 20 years within the design community as a distinct term to describe practice-based inquiry that generates transferable knowledge. Now, of course, if you apply that to game design, you might get, if you will, research through game design. And as a matter of fact, making an actual game is useful to materialize the design question or aesthetic issues that are being addressed. Kassabian Jarman, in a paper from 2016, wrote something that I think is applicable to Otogarden. They wrote, there are two major types of music games. Games in which the player is right or wrong, such as Guitar Hero, on the one hand, and on the other, apps and other kind of programs in which the player engages in sandbox play, such as in Mike Oldfield's Tres Lunas or Brian Eno and Peter Chilver's iPhone app, Scape. So this paper is from 2016. Since then, I would say, even if what I just said stands, I do think that the situation changed. With regards to understanding what a digital game is and what is the context of digital games, really. Yule, in 2019, wrote that the classic game model made in 2003, a model he designed to encapsulate basically everything that a digital game can possibly be according to its formal properties and characteristics, is now outdated. But this classic game model made it useful for noticing when our conception of game actually changes. And by now, whole subgenres like walking simulators a la Proteus go beyond the classic model. Therefore, designers and players alike challenge classic models of digital games, trying to break new ground. And indeed, this sentiment is echoed by Arsene and Calleia, The objects we call digital games they write are not games in and of themselves. They are software applications that are designed to afford one or several simultaneous game perspectives. Several people can be interacting with others on a specific server and a specific map of the multiplayer part of a Call of Duty session, with all of them playing in fact different concurrent games, dedicating themselves to different concurrent activities and objectives. While this covers a part of my theoretical background, I was also inspired by current digital games. For instance, Untitled Game and Animal Crossing, and you might notice that the visuals are somewhat inspired by these two games. But indeed, my main inspiration was Electroplankton, which I do believe remains, after some 15 years, the most accomplished example of musical improvisation in the context of digital games. And in fact, improvisation enjoys the curious distinction of being both the most widely practiced of all musical activities and the least acknowledged and understood. Idiomatic improvisation, writes Derek Bailey, is mostly concerned with the expression of an idiom, such as jazz, flamenco, or baroque. Non-idiomatic improvisation has other concern, and is most usually found in so-called free improvisation. It is not usually tied to representing an idiomatic identity. I do believe that improvisation that players can engage with in Otogarden can be considered as a non-idiomatic, somewhat free improvisation. So, as I mentioned, improvisation can be an activity of enormous complexity and sophistication, or a much simpler form of engagement with music. Lewis wrote, drummer Elvin Jones puts the case succinctly with regards to his own involvement in what some people call freedom music. There's no such thing as freedom without some kind of control, at least self-control or self-discipline. Coltrane did a lot of experimenting in that direction. Even though it gave an impression of freedom, it was basically a well thought out and highly disciplined piece of work. So this is a very sharp comment by Elvin Jones. Also, Frith had to note that all music making is about the mind and the body. The immediacy of improvisation no more makes unscored music mindless than the immediacy of talking makes unscripted speech somehow without thought. So indeed, improvisation can be an activity of enormous complexity and sophistication, requiring the intervention of highly trained and prepared professional musicians. But it can also be the simplest and most direct expression. Specifically in the field of new interfaces for musical expression, the term musicking has emerged to describe a more accessible music-making activity that is not exclusive to trained musicians. This trend has produced designs which have enabled non-musicians to actively play with music rather than only passively listening to music. So this is where I would insert Otogarden. It is an interface for musical expression, if you will, and is very much focused on musical improvisation for the non-trained musician. So, to conclude, I would like to refer back to what Umberto Eco wrote in reference to the open work. The working movement, he says, is the possibility of numerous different personal interventions, but it is not an amorphous invitation to indiscriminate participation. The invitation offers the performer the opportunity for an oriented insertion into something which always remains the word intended by the author. And I have the presumption to believe that Otogarden can be understood as such, and the design constraints that I put into Otogarden limit the possible intervention from the player. The loop, if you notice, is fairly short. There is a relatively limited playing area, there's no saving opportunity, and the concept is to stimulate frantic exploration so that the player has to run from one end to the other of the garden in order to create difficult to achieve sonic juxtapositions. Indeed, musicking in connection with digital games has, I believe, an inherent value. Inherent musical ability is a defining music characteristic of being human. This fundamental quality of being human, Blacking argues, is consistently stifled in the West by elitist conceptions of music, which arbitrarily set standards of musical competence that inhibit the general participation in artistic creativity. With Otogarden, I try to address this issue and to put in the hands of players a tool that would allow them to explore their ability to improvise musically. With this, I conclude. Questions? Thank you very much.